More on our headline story now. China says it has eradicated extreme poverty. For a closer look, we're joined by Alfred Wu. He's from the Kuan School of Public Policy. Professor Wu, there's some scepticism over the data that's been presented by the Chinese president. How do you view that data?
I would think the target is not very high. So in general, I would believe the data is true. Because overall, they leave 68 million people in rural areas out of poverty.
And why not use the same standards used by international organizations?
Usually, you really look into local conditions. And also, some countries use another kind of indicator. For example, some countries use revenue data. Some countries use expenditure data. It means that how people live in a kind of condition. So I would say that in generally, poverty researcher will think every country has their own condition. They can actually adapt their own standards.
So bearing in mind then that local conditions will vary, of course, across China because it is a very large country, is this anti-poverty drive sustainable and perhaps even across the board as far as, the size of China is concerned?
I think now this is the biggest concern, particularly from observers in this field. Because the Chinese government use very much resources to tackle the poverty issue at a local level. But we don't know whether people, particularly poor people, gain some capacity to develop on their own. So if they rely a lot from the government, then eventually it's possible to let them to fall into poverty again in the future.
And Professor, how big an issue is the income gap going to be in the years to come in China?
Now, the Chinese government emphasizes a lot about absolute poverty. So it's not about relative poverty. So in rural areas and urban areas, there is a big income gap between two areas. For example, urban areas earn 2 times over rural people. Then within the urban areas, they have a lot of income inequality issues. So I would say that this is a kind of big challenge for Chinese government to handle in the near future.
Professor Wu, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your perspective with us this evening. We've been speaking there to Associate Professor Alfred Wu from the Kuan School of Public Policy.